The date was October 24th, 2013. That was when I gave my first icebreaker. My first icebreaker was called, let me see if I can remember what this is. The New Normal and the Words I Say. It ended up being about 6 minutes long. It might have been a little bit longer because I'm not very good with time. The whole premise of my initial speech, my first speech, was I was going to tell everybody about what it was like to be a person who was living with MS, multiple sclerosis. Now, that was significant for me because in 2013 was 10 years after I was diagnosed. And the reason I joined Toastmasters was because my partner had suggested, you need to join Toastmasters because you need somebody to talk to. It turns out that was not wrong. However, after I finished work, I was working in Richmond at the time. I had my work computer. I was really wanting to make sure that I got this speech written because, it was my first speech. So of course, what do you tell yourself every time you start something new? I'm going to be perfect right out of the gate. So my very first speech, I get up to the stage, in the front of the stage. This was the project management PMI Toastmasters. And I had my notes, 3 pages, double-spaced, exactly what I was going to say. And I read off. It was November 5th, 2003. And I told the story of what it was to be diagnosed with MS, and then also to learn how to run, and then also to learn how to bike, and then how to swim, and then how to run triathlons, because I'd lived a long life before getting up to start telling these stories. It was an interesting way to express myself and to tell stories that I hadn't really done before. Over the course of the next months and years, I finished what's called the Competent Communicator Manual, the first 10 speeches. I got my CC. It actually took me a year to finish those first 10 speeches. And then I finished my advanced leadership, and I continued working on stuff, practicing speech. Now, the purpose of this particular speech is to reflect on my presentation mastery path. Presentation mastery is one of the 11 paths you'll sign up for when you join Toastmasters initially. When you think about the title of that particular path, you think to yourself, well, I'm going to be great at this by the time I'm finished this path. Well, I'll tell you, and this is the end of my first kind of little section of this speech. Mastery, presentation mastery, but mastery in anything is not a destination. It's a goal. It's always something that you're reaching for. Because I'll tell you, in the last 10 years since I joined Toastmasters, there is no moment, no thought, no second when I thought, I got this. I'm as good as I'm going to get. Every time I give a speech, every time I tell a story, every time I sit down after giving a speech, there's a moment when I think, that was pretty good. But I could have done something slightly differently, and maybe it landed a little bit better. Every single speech has an evaluation. Every single speech has some feedback that comes back to it. Now, there's a lot of things I've learned in the process in this 10 years of doing my speeches, my speeching, if I'm going to apply a word to it. In 10 years, I've done over 90 speeches that I've taken credit for. I've done more speeches that I haven't taken any credit for. because in the process, I've learned how to edit video. I've learned how to edit audio. I've been an area director. I've been a division director. I've been a logistics manager. I learned how to run a YouTube channel, just all within the last 3 years. All opportunities I had provided, well, no, they weren't provided to me. I reached for because I saw a need and I said, I can figure out how to do that. And the nice thing about Toastmasters is it's a very, very safe place to fail. It is a low cost environment where the risk of failure is high and the cost of failure is low. So every speech I could do, there's always a chance I'm going to fall flat on my face. These are things that I've learned in the last 10 years. There's no need to be perfect, only better, slightly better, and improving, and improving, and improving. Now, public speaking is something that I really should have been kind of natural at. Before I joined Toastmasters, I was on stage before. Live bands with karaoke. I've been able to sing in front of hundreds and hundreds of people in different events over the years. So stage fright isn't the reason I got up here. Like, if you ask my other half, the reason I got up here is because I needed to talk to somebody and she was tired of listening. But it has given me the opportunity to explore my own personal stories in a way that I don't know that I would have ever had the chance to do before. I have told the same speech, similar speeches over the years, talking about MS, talking about Ironman, talking about racing marathons, talking about any kind of thing that I've done. I've told a lot of these stories a few different times. But you know what I've learned? Every time I tell a story, it feels different to me the next time I tell the story. The story actually changes with the retelling. The moments, the things that I focus on, also change with the retelling. Now, you may hear the same speech one day and the next day, and you might think you hear the same points, but you'll actually take something different from it. One thing that I remember specifically, one of my best speeches that I've ever done, and this is years ago, was a speech that I wrote that was the process of getting diagnosed with MS, mirrored with the experience of running Ironman. The uncertainty and all of the nervousness that comes around with that perspective between the two. Those two speeches I did that single speech I did, it started off as a table topic, as a question, as a speech. What is a story you could tell? And I thought, well, this is a story I could tell. And those two parts of that story were meant to rhyme. One half of a story, the other half of a story. They had the same beats, the same story points. One of them was getting the worst news of my life, and one of them was doing one of the most extreme events anybody can ever do. The same points, the same emotions, the same stories, with different morals, different takeaways. I did that for competition. I won the club contest, and then I ran the area contest. And then I took it all the way up to the division contest in Toastmasters. So if you're new in Toastmasters, you'll learn about contests in the next couple of months. But I got to the division level as contests, rewriting the speech, and each iteration, each change of this speech, it grew and it changed and it grew and it changed, and different parts of the stories landed with different people. And then I didn't proceed past the division contest, but that's fine. Because then the MS Society reached out to me and they said, we have a fundraiser coming up at a golf course in Surrey. Can you give a speech to this fundraiser to talk about how the MS Society has impacted you and things that you have done? So I rewrote the speech again, but this time instead of being a 5 to 7 minute speech, it became a 12-minute long speech. And I rewrote it in verse. I turned it into a big, long spoken word poem. And I'll tell you, it landed with everybody. Some other things that have changed for me over this 10-year period is I've become an MC. So I MC fundraising events, MS Walk, MS Bike, the Scenic City Tour, the Fraser Valley Grape Escape, where they just basically give me a microphone and a couple of talking points, and then I go up to people all over the site and I say, hey, Emerson, what brings you out here today? And I don't even necessarily go up with the microphone. I'll say, Antonio, what brings you here today? And then I write the notes down. And then I'll point them out later in the day and say, let's recognize Antonio for, being out here, being a part of the team. All things that I never, ever could have imagined being or doing before joining Toastmasters. I can look at an agenda and see exactly where all of the things need to be. Now I'm coming to the end of my 12 minutes here. The point I want to leave everybody here, whether you're an experienced Toastmaster, a distinguished Toastmaster, or whether you're a new Toastmaster and you've just done your first speech. Presentation mastery is a goal, but it's never a check mark that I have ever felt like I've achieved. There is no point in any speech that I've ever given where I think to myself, yeah, I got this. Because I'm going to sit down after this speech, I'm going to listen to my evaluation and my evaluator, I'm going to be given some feedback, and there's always something to reach for. And that is what mastery is about. Mastery is not a destination. It isn't a point on a map that you're going to ever reach. It is a practice. It is a practice that you repeat, and it's always just out of reach. Now,